Good morning, everyone. It's January 15th, and we're starting our planning board meeting. The first item this morning is adoption of resolutions. There are several. The first four, all board members present can vote on. The first one is Park Potomac Preliminary Plan Amendment. The second one is 24-927 Burnt Hill Road Administrative Subdivision Plan. The third is 24-927 Burnt Hill Road Forest Conservation Plan. And the fourth is Good Hope Estates Lot 38 Block BB Forest Conservation Plan. Do I have a motion for approval of these four resolutions?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the four resolutions.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it 4-0. The next is three are all can vote except Commissioner Hedrick. The first one is Central Square Preliminary Plan. The second is Central Square Site Plan, and the third is Central Square Forest Conservation Plan. Do I have a motion for approval of these three resolutions?
I move for the approval of three resolutions.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 3-0-1. The next is approval of minutes. All can vote on this. It's the minutes of December 18th. Do I have a motion for approval of these minutes?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes. The ayes have it 4-0. And next we have one record plat this morning. It's subdivision plat number 20260300 Montrose Industrial Park. Do I have a motion for, where staff is recommending approval? Do I have a motion for approval of this record plat?
I move to approve the record plat.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it 4-0. And next, we have one regulatory extension request. It's the Fraley Farm East Preliminary Plan Number 1, 2024-0080. Regulatory extension request number 4, where staff is recommending approval of the extension request. Do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve the extension request.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it 4-0. And next, we will have item number 5. It's planning for heat. Information briefing from to the planning board, where staff is recommending to provide the briefing. And this morning, we have Tina. Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to take 1 minute while they get set up. Thank you. Good morning again. We're on our item number 5, Planning for Heat, information briefing to the Planning Board. And this morning, we have Tina Schneider and Steve Finley providing this briefing. Thank you.
Good morning. Today's presentation is a briefing on urban heat, its causes, its effects, laws, requirements, recommendations, and what's next. We think it's important because increasing temperatures and heat is the #1 climate threat to Maryland and to our county. Sure. Here. Yeah. So urban heat. It's the phenomenon where developed areas are hotter than their surrounding greener areas. Yet, within each of these areas or sub-areas, there are many thermal differences and microclimates, making some streets and places cooler or hotter depending on the site's conditions and variables. So what are development variables that influence urban heat? Impervious cover. It absorbs and stores and radiates solar heat. Types of vegetation. Are there trees there? Are there forests there? Are there shrubs there and grass? Vegetation density. How wide are the trees or the buffers? And what is the shape of the trees? And where is the location? Is it on a slope? Is it in a valley? The absence of vegetation, of course, influences heat. The types of materials and surfaces and roofs, such as asphalt and concrete and brick and shingles, those all emanate heat, and the darker the color, the more they emanate. Surface and roof color. Is it dark? Are the surfaces dark? Again, they radiate more heat. What are the temperatures? What are the temperatures of the day? And then we have to look at the future. What is the climate forecasts? And we have to plan for that. Buildings, the density of buildings and the geometry of buildings makes a difference in an urban area. And atmospheric pollution also affects heat. And so does waste heat from vehicles, from air conditioners, and industrial processes. So there are 3 different types of urban heat. The first urban heat is atmospheric temperatures. And is urban heat islands, and that's atmospheric temperatures. So the map on the left shows a NOAA map, and it was taken in August of 2022. The hottest areas are in red, cooler areas orange, then yellow, and the coolest areas in green. The map on the right shows the county's impervious surfaces in white, and you can see that the hottest areas are those that are in red. And on the right, there's a high percentage of impervious cover, and that is where directly correlated to the hotter areas of the county. So the second type of urban heat is surface temperature. The slide shows 5 columns in different areas with impervious surfaces. Under each photograph are corresponding infrared surface temperatures. The far left image is a residential neighborhood in Silver Spring. The black asphalt is about 137 degrees. On the grass planted bed, it's 102 degrees. And in the shaded areas where there is a tree, it's 95 degrees. That's a total difference of nearly 42 degrees. In the commercial area in Silver Spring, on an 85-degree day, the asphalt is 155.8 degrees. In the shade, it's about 149.5, and under the tree, it's 111.5 degrees. Another difference of 44.3 degrees. I want to highlight one more, and that's the playground with the covered surface of blue, which we're seeing a lot of. We took thermal readings there, and it was 161.8 degrees on the surface itself. On the grass, it's 115 degrees. So again, a huge difference of 45.4 degrees. These readings show that how hot it actually is on the surfaces, and then also the cooling effect of trees and buildings. But even grass can significantly drop temperatures. In areas without vegetations, buildings and shade structures can help, but vegetation is the most effective. The third type of heat is the Universal Thermal Comfort Index, and that's what it actually feels like to the human skin and to the human body. This is the human experience. And the chart on the left shows how this feels like temperature begins to affect the human body at about 89.6 degrees. When temperatures rise above that and go into the 90s, we're susceptible to stronger stress. And then from 100 degrees to 115, there's a very strong susceptibility to heat stress. And of course, anything beyond 115, extreme stress can occur. The upper right graphic shows the heat-related deaths in Maryland. The far right bar is 2021 with 18 deaths, with significant increases during the last 2 summers, peaking at 2025 with 34 deaths. This is an increase in 25.9% from 2024. The chart on the lower right shows a number of heat-related emergency departments and urgent care visits by their age group. The largest affected populations are those over 65. However, it was striking to see that the second largest heat-related illnesses were in the age group of 18 to 44. So it's hot now, and it's only going to get hotter. The chart in the upper right shows the number of days above 90 degrees. The bar on the left shows an average of 30 days each summer from 1980 to 2010. The next bar shows 2011 to 2040, where there are about 49 days each summer over and above 90 degrees. You can see temperatures will continue to rise in Maryland, and we'll be experiencing, as projected, over 2 months each summer in sequence, with temperatures exceeding 90 degrees. It's also important to note that this forecast chart was based on low carbon emission outputs. That's if the United States curbs their carbon emissions. So who is most vulnerable? It affects people with homes who don't have air conditioning, neighborhoods with fewer trees and high impervious cover, people whose bills exceed their 5% annual income, and then a lot of people who are outside walking, biking, using public transit, and those who work outdoors. And now Steve will talk about the laws, requirements, and precedents.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Planning Board members. And for the record, I'm Steve Findlay with the Environment and Climate Division. And there's always that person who is focusing, that annoying person who focuses on the laws and policies and so forth and so on, and just harps on that sort of stuff. I am that annoying person, so that's why I'm here this morning. But it is important to basically to make sure that we are constantly reminding ourselves what are we rooting our recommendations and policies in, and what have we told the public we are doing, and making sure that we are doing those things. So obviously this starts from Thrive Montgomery 2050, which does identify environmental health and resilience as one of the 3 pillars of county planning. And it's a very difficult job to try to balance the equity, the environment, and the economy pieces, and all of the pieces that go along with that. But we have to recognize it so that we're intentional about making sure that we address those things in all of our planning. Thrive has a major focus on mitigating impacts of climate change, including extreme heat, and it also has a big focus on protecting and improving human health. Importantly, it also includes a commitment to implementing the planning-related recommendations of the county's Climate Action Plan. And that Climate Action Plan identifies MNC PPC roles in carbon sequestration and climate adaptation, includes the recommendations for creating green infrastructure, creation of green spaces, expanding and protecting forest and tree canopies, and other actions that address extreme heat. We have, I think, recently talked about Bill 3-22, so I will not dwell on that too much, but it does include a requirement that we have an assessment of climate impacts for all our master plans, including addressing the impacts of urban heat. And it establishes a protocol for these climate assessments, including evaluating our recommendations for that.
Is it better to, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it better to ask a question now or to wait till the end? A question about the sequestration. With the Climate Action Plan, could you go into a little more detail about what our role is on the carbon? I'm curious about carbon sequestration because that seems an awfully large goal for a county to address carbon sequestration specifically as opposed to minimizing the amount of output and transportation and things like that. So could you give a little more detail on the sequestration piece?
Sure, be happy to do that. That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, the sequestration pieces is an important piece of basically the things we have in our toolbox to try to address climate change. We have there are a number of recommendations that are focusing specifically on reducing our emissions, but there's also a focus on recognizing that number one, we want to be able to continue. We need to not just reduce our emissions, but we have this excess fraction of carbon in the atmosphere. And we need to be able to be drawing that down because we know that that concentration has already exceeded the levels that are causing these impacts. So the sequestration piece is very important. And the Park and Planning Commission actually has the most significant responsibilities in the county through the administration of the Forest Conservation Law, through the Parks Department and all of the land that they own, through our recommendations in Thrive to protect the agricultural reserve and all of the forest areas that are part of that. And those represent significant resources that draw carbon out of the atmosphere each year and then store it. So it's the carbon sequestration and the storage that's represented by those basically carbon sinks. And then also in our master plans, we have recommendations for increasing tree cover. We look at designs for roadways to increase tree canopy along the roadways. All of that factors into the carbon sequestration piece that we have a significant role in.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, finally, just again, as we look to Thrive Montgomery and the Climate Action Plan and these other requirements, then they filter down into recommendations that we make specifically in some of our master plans. You can see there's an image there that talks about the Cool Streets guidelines that were developed for downtown Silver Spring. So we do then kind of work our way down through the system, and then ultimately these things get implemented at time of development review by implementing all of these recommendations.
Can I also add on to the sequestration? So in our climate assessment, there's a section where we quantify how much carbon is being sequestered by the amount of vegetation that is there and the type. So are there wetlands there? Are there forests there? Are there street trees there? That's all quantified. And then honestly, when we expect forests to be removed, those are deductions. So we're quantifying that.
I was just, yeah, I was clarifying that it's mostly involved in the vegetation and aspects of the forest conservation plan, that there wasn't an aspect of the sequestration that wasn't additional to that, because a lot of our urban development, of course, like, we want the trees and the tree cover mostly for the urban, we're talking about the urban heat island effect and comfort and things like that, but even a very nice, very large tree planted over a long period of time is not particularly efficient. Like a couple on a parking lot are not efficient carbon sequestration, even though they may be very good at the heat island effect. But for, yeah, the larger aspects of dealing with forested areas and maintaining our stream valley parks and things like that. That was, yeah, my question. Thank you, appreciate that.
And it's cumulative too, yeah. Oh. So, knowing the laws, seeing the sources of heat, the climate forecasts, and the impacts on human health, we look at opportunities for urban planners to mitigate these heat impacts. And we've put them in master plans and in site plans. And recommendations fall into different categories, such as habitat, vegetation recommendations, material recommendations, nature-based design strategies, shading, and also building recommendations. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail with each of those. So preserving existing forests, woodlands, tree clusters, and habitats, especially in the developed areas, decreases thermal temperatures that are adjacent to them. And the greater the forest cluster in size, and the greater the cooling capacity. So preserving existing trees is also important because larger trees have significant and measurably greater cooling capacity and effect than younger trees and small ones that may or may not reach maturity. And we should incorporate more trees and shrubs and herbaceous species and green cover into the landscape on public land, but also on private land, in open spaces and throughout the community. An example of vegetative cooling capacity is demonstrated in this image along Piney Branch Road. Parts of the street and community has trees and a stream valley. The map on the right shows the coolest areas immediately adjacent to the trees, and places without trees are the hottest, shown in red. Next are material recommendations. As identified earlier, darker impervious surfaces are heat sources and emitters. So we recommend using light-colored concrete, light colored asphalt, light pavers, and bricks. Also, removing excessive impervious surfaces is extremely helpful, and we can replace that with use of porous surfaces. And porous surfaces, we're not seeing enough of those, but they have benefits not just for allowing water to transfer into the groundwater table, but also the ground air is cooler than, the ground temperatures are cooler than the surrounding air. So the cooler ground makes its way through the porous gaps in the surface and can cool the surrounding area. We recommend using nature-based design strategies, and they are actions to protect and sustainably manage and restore nature or modified ecosystems to address societal and ecological challenges while providing human well-being and biodiversity. Some of these elements are green roofs, native tree plantings, urban forest patches, open green spaces, green corridors, buffer protection and mitigation, stratified native plantings. That's something we'd like to see more of, where we use grasses and shrubs and trees to create a more complex stratified ecosystem in urban areas. Bioretention, those are planted with native vegetation, and also native lawns. As we saw in the picture that showed the infrared colors, lawns can be significantly cooler, so not just trees.
Could you explain what is stratified native plantings? I don't know
Sure,
that.
yeah, so oftentimes we see trees planted alone, and we don't see much understory. So, stratified area is, say you would have grasses, and then you would have perennials, which would be the next height level at maybe 2 to 3 foot, and that would be perennial vegetation. Then the next height from, say, 2 to 5 feet, you would have shrubs, and then even higher understory. So that creates a complex green, sort of stratified, vertical, complex ecosystem that provides greater cooling capacity. It also provides greater habitat. And when trees are not possible, shade structures should be used where people gather and shop. We need to integrate them in areas where there are sidewalks, maybe bicycle facilities and transit stops. And the new American Planning Association recommends that we have seating every 500 feet in commercial areas. And that seating should be shaded, whether it's shaded with trees or shaded with a structural device. And where possible, avoid wind blocks. And then consider wind-oriented buildings, which also align with staff's recommendations for solar-oriented buildings. And where people gather, consider the use of misters, drinking fountains, and fan features. And then many of these recommendations are now seen in master plans. A few are listed in the upper right-hand corner. We also see continued research. We also need continued research, and that's essential for staff to do. Now that we have a climate division, it's a little bit more possible, but we need to continue to look at the climate forecasts and how they're going to be impacting our community and the county and everywhere. And we need to continue to look at new cooling strategies and techniques, new methodologies that communities are using throughout the country, new materials. There's a lot of new inventions that are out there. Some of them are physically lighter, cooler. Technology is really advancing in this area. And then what are the trends that planners are using all around the country? And it's evolving, and we keep seeing every year, every 6 months. I'm amazed at how many new documents are coming out, new strategies. Our GIS team is doing a great job with providing us a lot of the data that we need. And also, we're now embarking on something, it's a new feels like data. And that's planning staff has been participating in a project with Thrive Earth Exchange, other county departments, and academic specialists to develop a model that enables us to predict the feels like temperature from combining surface temperatures and a number of land use attributes such as impervious surfaces, forests, trees, and green cover, and even building heights. This data, the feels like temperature that I presented, is very hard to come by right now. If this model is developed, that is underway right now, it'll be the first in the nation. And then, and finally, we're doing a good job about getting these recommendations in master plans. But we're not seeing many of these applied at the site planning level because there are multiple competing and even conflicting priorities at the approval stage. But as you can see, ensuring we preserve, evolve, and implement these heat mitigation strategies, it's essential for human health and the current future of our county residents. And remember, it's only going to get hotter, and that heat is the #1 climate hazard that Montgomery County faces. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, thank you. This is very informative, and I really appreciate, you providing this briefing. I have some comments, questions, but I want to see if any of my board members want to start it out.
Yeah, thanks for this great presentation. It's really interesting to see sort of the broad spectrum of different strategies that could be applied to try to, together address many of the kind of acute impacts of heat in specific areas. And I'm glad you brought up the site plan issue, because one of the things that I noticed, one of the things I thought of as I was looking at some of the specific challenges that you mentioned was impervious surface, and of course, and it reminded me of some instances with maybe two recent projects, and I won't name them. Honestly, I can't even remember the name at the moment. But the challenge during those site plan discussions was basically it felt like the internal circulation, so whether it was private or public roads, what was being proposed for internal circulation was a little bit overkill. It felt a little bit duplicative, and it seemed like there could have been opportunities to remove impervious surface and maintain circulation and connectivity, which would have also allowed opportunities for any number of these strategies: vegetation, stratified vegetation, shade structures, kind of you name it, in addition to making just sort of open space for people to use if we had removed impervious surface. So that site plan, once things gets to, when things get to site plan, obviously it's a little bit hard at that stage to change, and I think that we're often reluctant to kind of introduce a lot of changes at that stage because it's burdensome on the applicant and it introduces additional cost. But I'm wondering what we, or internally staff, can do to at least, keep that at the forefront of our minds with some site review. Are there opportunities to remove impervious surface when possible? Whether it's narrowing roads, whether it's removing little segments if they don't seem necessary. With this in mind, but also kind of with a broader, like, just quality of living in mind too, if people can use that space for better things rather than just have it being empty impervious surface a lot of the time.
Yes, I definitely think we have the opportunity at site plan review to do that. I think, it's always a challenge because we are balancing so many priorities, and we want to make sure that there's adequate, circulation and that the fire trucks have what they need. That usually is a big part of it. But we're really trying to push towards having designs that kind of somehow, thread the needle with all of these things. And that's something we're really working towards. But, knowing that the board would be looking for that too is always really helpful for us to when we're having those conversations with the developers and whatnot, to say, this is something that the board is interested in also. And so this type of design is something you should consider.
Thanks, and I definitely take your point that it feels like it's threading the needle is exactly the right way to say it. The last thing we want to do is reduce. Well, obviously, you need certain access issues for emergency response. There could be some flexibility there. I'm interested in kind of conversations more on that end. Where could they be flexible? And of course, connectivity is just important because it serves a lot of what our broader goals are. We don't want to remove those because once that happens, then we're sort of chipping away at other things that are important. But I'm interested in more thoughts that staff has kind of as we get to site plan about where we can kind of starting to address some of that.
I would also add that something we should consider is the, maybe different surface types for the type of things that we need. Sometimes we'd have to look and talk with fire, and rescue about what different types of surface types they could use rather than just having, your typical asphalt for a turnaround and things like that. I think that's definitely an area we can explore more.
Now, I want to also just talk momentarily about some of the recommendations for areas right now in the urban areas where it's 100% or 95% impervious cover. And so our recommendations, you'll be seeing them more frequently, is to reduce impervious cover, right? And then to put buildings and then add some green in that area. Try to get more green cover and reduce it. Maybe go up higher so we can get a little bit more green. And those are difficult asks. And the second thing, we also are really advocating for, in America, the auto is centric. We have an auto-centric society. And some communities that you're speaking of, it's all grid, whereas in Europe, they put on road diets, and they even have areas where no cars are allowed, just more increases. We have all been to Bethesda. We really like that area in Bethesda where, there's just more humans walking and there's no cars allowed. So, where and how can we get that in communities? And we're looking at that as best as we can to kind of think outside of the box. But also we do have, a lot of times transportation and emergency vehicles takes precedent. And again, it's balancing those, we want to be visionary, but we also need to comply. So it's hard.
I think there's a,
May I, real quick, just add something to the conversation? So as we're seeing more developments that include townhomes, especially in the northern part of the county and in the White Flint area, we're seeing more private roads. We have a lot more flexibility to ask for certain things with the private roads than we do with the public roads. And that's not to say one is better than the other, but I think we can, we have a little bit more say, and this board has more say in kind of what can occur within and around those private road areas, but still trying to, accommodate what Ms. Sorrento said about kind of balancing that, the needs for traffic, for fire, for safety, for utilities and all those things. So again, that's part of, you may not see that all the time as it comes to you, but it's definitely been something that's, that all the agencies review when we do take it through a process.
Could you explain why we have more flexibility on private road than public? I didn't know that.
So, well, first of all, the width. So you may have a reduced width with a private road. It may not, you won't have a right-of-way with that. So there's certain things that the county will and won't allow within a right-of-way that we might be able to push for and advocate for as part of a private road.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just coming.
I totally, appreciate your presentation. Not just about the heat. I think that there is some kind of challenge that we can incorporate what is the best environmentally with all the other priorities that comes in front of us, okay? We want sidewalks, we want side paths, we want bikeways, and we want to make them pretty wide, okay? And if we have a space, we like to have them on both sides. And, at the same time, we want more housing, and we want more affordable housing, and we want to build everywhere. At the same time, I see that, and I totally agree with you, Robert, that it looks like that now many of our development is toward townhouses, okay? We see a lot of townhouses. It's coming for a lot of reasons that I totally understand. And we don't have enough transit. So people still have to be in their cars. We like it or not, it's part of our life. United States is big. It's not the size of Europe. Maybe just one of our states is Europe. I love what we see in Europe and everything else, but we have to commute. We have to go from one point to another point. We have a lot of plan to reduce the commuting, but it's not gonna happen maybe sometime after our lifetime it's gonna happen. But right now, we need to provide parking, we need to provide driving, we need to sort of juggle all of these priorities. And I know that when these priorities, I think that site plan is pretty late. You cannot make changes if it is a big impact. You may ask some other things like shade or other things and have more trees if it's space available, but Nothing that really changed changed the site. So I think it's very important that, and also we want to bring development here, okay? We want to make it that people can come and build here because we need them to build houses. So it has to be some kind of peace between all of those and how we could decide what are the priorities. I know sometimes that the staff does the best and bring recommendations and it comes in front of us. And we have to juggle that. Do we want to have more space to have more trees, or do we want to have another 20 or 30 units, okay? This comes and we have to juggle those and we have to look at what is the best as a whole for our residents living in the county. Bottom line, I see we sitting here as the planning board, we have our customers and the people that we are serving are the residents of the county, not only the one in future, the one that they are living there right now and paying the taxes. So we have to provide some kind of balance for all of those. So it's not an easy job. And I totally understand that it is difficult, cool, your last statement, it is difficult. And sometimes that we make decisions doesn't mean that we don't regard the climate. We do, but it's sort of a peace between the two. And, there are sometimes that we have to make adjustments for that.
I think we could do both sometimes. And I want to just address a couple of things. For sidewalks, for bicycle lanes, we could make those a different surface color. That's not a difficult thing to do, and it probably doesn't cost a lot more money. Or we can make them porous. We're not seeing enough of those two easier apples to pick from the tree, and that would be great. So we realize that we need pedestrian mobility, but maybe there's a way to just continually keep in our mind, how can we keep this community cool? Because again, these dense communities are hot, and it's not enjoyable for people to go outside in the summer.
Just to tell you, I know from the thing, porous is not an answer. Porous doesn't stay. It is difficult to maintain, and depending on what it is, it may not be accessible. So, and it's not really, sometimes, the cost may be prohibitive. So it's a lot of give and take to do. And really want to know, you didn't show that if you have a bikeway, just if you make it green or blue, how much does the temperature come down? I don't know. I understand for trees and shades that they make a big difference. And I know that the color does make a difference, but I'm thinking that if you have like a concrete or you have bituminous, yeah, it's pretty dark, but the concrete has a light, what is the difference between the color? Do you have any kind of record on?
We do, and we hired consultants in 2022 to help us do the cool streets for Silver Spring, and they did analysis on differential costs. And I do think that we need ongoing studies to look at these exact things. What are the costs of these mechanisms that we're going to use, and what are the benefits? That is something that we need to continually look at. It's hard to find. And I just want to also say to the porous pavement is difficult to get to maintain if you're trying to get stormwater credit. But the benefits of don't always end with stormwater. You can put in porous pavement to allow the groundwater thermal temperatures, the cooling effect of the ground to emanate through the porous pavement and cool the surface itself. So it depends. There's two different purposes, but you can separate those.
Yeah, so thank you for your presentation. I really loved the concept of the thermal comfort index, like what's the feel like temperature, and so, if we can, more people can think through that. What does it really feel like? I like that, it's a lot about impervious surfaces, and then one of the key, you said, for carbon sequestration or just some greening, it's all about, maybe about the vegetation. It is tough that, we can put a lot of things in our master plans, but we want to get more implemented. We just went through the growth and infrastructure policy, and then we went through the incentive zoning. We have to, I guess, over time, revisit what are we getting in the incentive zoning. We put in we think these are the key things in order to get more density, but maybe over time most developers need to be incentivized to do something, and so what incentives can we give? Keep thinking of developers to implement many of these practices. I would think, being a developer and talking about costs, maybe some of the larger projects are good ones to push the developer, because maybe on the larger projects, the cost per whatever can come down a little bit. But I do think if we don't incentivize or make it a priority, it just won't happen. So what can there be some give and takes to incentivize some of these things? I did think that, and also bang for the buck, you talk about these impervious surfaces, either for parking lots or travel paths, maybe the fire road and all this other stuff. I mean, those are big. Maybe there's some way to have some pilot projects of having the porous pavers or something, or that can really, because once you show that the benefits, or the more it's done, maybe the cost comes down, you can show. So, yep, this challenge now is how do you implement some of these things and then the more you can nudge and push, and maybe some trade-offs, some of these development projects that come in, could help. So I appreciate. This is very important, and it helps me as we go through more projects, and seeing what we can do with the importance of it feel like temperature, and how we can change some of the projects to make it feel cooler. Okay.
If I may add one other thought, one of the things that we found fairly consistently is that the cost works out better if there is an intention from the very beginning of the design to incorporate these features in and be aware of that, rather than having a plan that's basically already drawn out, and then finding ways to go in and try to squeeze in things in other areas. We have typically found that the cost can really be accommodated a lot of the time if it's the intention to include these things from the very beginning of the project, and then you design it to do that.
Yeah. So how do it's in the master plans what we want, but how do we get to them early on? Is it when they come in for when they're starting to talk to us about projects? How do we push this, or the DRC time, or is that too late? So how do we talk shop with these developers or people early on? What are the touch points?
Yeah.
I think concept plan is a perfect example of a very easy touch point, right? That's before any major design has happened. They're coming in to get feedback. And I think one of the main reasons why we're presenting here today is just to share the data, but also to put it front and center in your mind, so that when you are looking at these, when you're looking at concept plans, we do pushing on our end. But it's helpful if we get support from you as well. There's some really easy solutions. Not everything needs to be difficult. Not everything, we're not looking to reduce density. We're not looking to do anything like that. We're just looking to find ways, and some are easier and some are harder, to cool these more urban areas, because frankly, you're not going to want to live there if it's so hot. I mean, that's going to make those areas more desirable for the residents, and really, in the long term, the developers can sell them for more if they have some of these elements versus not.
Yeah, and I think sort of jumping on what several of the other commissioners have said, and to your point right there, I think it's important to stress, and as well as what Robert had mentioned earlier about townhomes, it's important to stress the importance of development for achieving these goals. The better that we can get trees when someone redevelops something that's an asphalt parking lot. Like the importance of achieving these climate goals and these heat reduction goals is not to restrict the development, it's to encourage the redevelopment and encourage redevelopment in a way that addresses problems that we know exist. And what we're not doing right now as a county, I'm not saying the planning commission, I'm saying generally speaking from our policy goals, is taking ourselves and shooting ourselves in the foot with it, because we have taken development from not enough to damn near non-existent. And we'll achieve none of this heat island reduction if no one takes the things that we did badly before and reinvents them in a way that we come to them and say, before you take and put the houses here, plant out the trees, plant out the roads, narrow the things, put in the bike paths, put in the walking spaces. We can do that. We've had policies in the past which have not addressed that. The reason that we are not Europe is not the size. France is roughly the size of Texas, all right? And you can get from Paris to, like, to the whole place on a train. We don't have that, and there's reasons for that, and it's policy reasons, not size, all right? And it's not population, all right? So we have made decisions. We can make better decisions. The only thing we can't do is make decisions which stop the development in its tracks. If we don't get the development and the investment, we don't have the money to do this. So a thing to think about as we're going through this process is to achieve these heat island reductions, we have to have development so they do the streetscapes and we don't have to find the money to do it ourselves. All right, that's the thing.
And one way to do that is to make it appealing to the market. So the best way to do that is that what you're recommending, you said the buzzword that people don't want to go there if it is too hot. So that is a way that to make it market-driven and make it appealing that they want to do it rather than something that they think, oh, this is extra cost, this is take the density or so on. So that is not easy, but it is something that probably, if you're doing some research, that how could we make this to be market-driven?
I think that I'm not pushing back against this idea of livability by any means of the heat island effect and the fact that we will end up with more deaths and more things. But I think that the human history of urbanization proves that we will put up with a lot before we don't go to a place that has economic activity. It will rise 40 degrees in Bethesda if we don't watch the carbon, and there will still be more people living there than anywhere else. All right, there was not internal population growth in cities until we put sewers in, but people still moved to places where everyone died of plague quite frequently. So I'm not pushing back against the idea that we shouldn't address this. I'm saying that the people will be there no matter what, because that is where the economic activity is, and that's where people are not going to leave Bethesda en masse. They're not going to leave Silver Spring en masse. They're not going to leave downtown DC en masse. They're still going to be living there, and there's going to be more people there than anywhere else. I'm saying that if we don't address the heat island effect, they will die. All right, people lived in New York when there were cholera epidemics on a fairly regular basis, and it grew and grew and grew. All right, people will live there where they're not going to leave. All right, growth may slow down. There's demographic things that we can address, but the heat island effect is going to kill more people because there's going to be more people there. Not that they're going to not go there. So there's something to think about when we're addressing these issues. Human beings will put up with a lot to be in an urban area. So just as a thought, not to push back that we don't. I'm saying push back that the reason we address this is because people will die in this situation. In the coming years, we don't address it. More people will.
Okay. Good. So, oh, go ahead.
Can I add one more thing?
Okay,
Because
one.
I think this is an important point, and it's not something you've discussed yet, but the data. So considering the political ways of the world right now, data was really hard to find for this project. All the NOAA data, all of the federal data that we've always relied upon has all been stripped and taken down. So I think that just highlights how important it is for us here to do what we can to get the data that we need and to continue to push for these things, because frankly, now we are on, the frontier of pushing for this, where, before maybe the federal government was a little bit more involved. And so I just want, all of us here to keep that in mind too, is like, we're kind of, the last people standing, really trying to do a lot of this work, and other local governments too, so.
Great, thank you for that,
have a comment.
bringing that to our, yeah, I want you to close us out there, and we're, Mr. Bart.
I really appreciate the comments of Commissioner Pedoeem. When the presentation was going on, I was thinking of, my own personal experience with health and the things that I could do to improve my health. And one of the things the doctor said to me is like, stop doing something. And so when we look at heat and the generation of heat, and then the want to build denser communities and take opportunities to get rid of green spaces to build denser housing. I was looking for something in your presentation where there's been an instance where green space has been given up for dense housing, and the heat index in the area has been the same, and I don't think that occurs. And so when I'm looking at this presentation and trying to balance what one of our executives here said is like the goal of the planning board is to build stuff. Well, if the goal is to build stuff, where does this presentation come in line? And when I look at this presentation, I look at the positives of not building and reducing the heat. But then if our goal here is just to build stuff and not plan to reduce heat, how do we balance it out? And so if there was an example of where we took a green space in some of the communities where we're approving new projects, like a thicket of private urban woods is now being considered for, 300 townhomes, or a once single-family community now is each lot is going to have 50 townhomes on it, and it's going to be impervious surface. It's going to be 4 parking spaces per unit or 2 parking spaces per unit. And then once a community that didn't have a hot space is now a hot space, and we've thrown the idea of reducing the heat out the window with the want to increase density and provide more housing. And then the people who lived in an area that once didn't have a hot zone now has a hot zone in their community. And if they work in DC or downtown Silver Spring or Bethesda, and they sought the respite of a residential home with a front yard and a backyard, now they're driving home and they have a hot spot in their community. And once where their home was, a cool place to rest and restore and prepare yourself for the next day, it is not as cool as it once was. And so balancing the goal of the planning board to build, and at the same time reduce heat, it'd be neat to see if there was ever a situation where something was replaced, especially a green space, and the heat was reduced and the community was improved. And it would be neat if that existed, or is there opportunity for that to exist? And if there isn't an opportunity for that to exist, maybe sometimes a moratorium until we come up with better technology and solutions are necessary. So when I look at presentations like this, I didn't consider myself an environmentalist or someone concerned with regards to heat islands, but in recent years, working in downtown Silver Spring and then driving home, and there's like a 10, 20, 15 degree heat difference, and there's solace and letting your body cool down. I appreciate it more, and I want other people to have the same opportunities I have. And if we're going to use green space for density, maybe more smaller lot, single-family homes with green space, rather than townhomes with heavy heat gathering aggregate concrete. So I appreciate your presentation, and I think there's a lot for us to think about.
Did you want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Commissioner Bartley. Actually, something you said triggered a thought in my mind about something I heard Vice Chair Linden talk about recently. Sorry to be calling you out here, but I thought this was a really good statement. This idea that the type of development that we have
has an impact on this in terms of the types of residential units. And so we see a lot of projects coming in now where maybe they were originally planned as multifamily, now they're coming in as townhouses. While there are ways through site design to implement environmentally positive features of those projects into a townhouse project, it's a little bit easier with a multifamily structure to incorporate. I mean, just look at our building here or the other buildings across the street that have green roofs and other features. It's a lot easier, the parking lots, to be able to incorporate, some of the environmental features that we're looking for on those than it is in a townhouse project. And so this is, something like, multifamily, we can get more units and we could potentially incorporate more environmental features that make things better. So we're building the density and we're finding ways to adapt to the changes that we're seeing in the environment.
Great. And then we do have to close this down, but these policies, I didn't feel that this is only for as you make projects denser, and it's for existing communities that don't have, they're all parking lots now and stuff like that. This is, how do you take those communities, you provide the boulevards with trees and things, a lot of, it was said that many of the older communities that were disinvested in, they didn't get their trees, they didn't get their green space, they didn't get, so this is also about bringing up older communities that there may not be any additional development in the near term. How do we make those greener? And these are all good techniques for that. So, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, that just triggered one thought. This always happens, right? I'll try to keep this quick. So in terms of older communities, obviously most of what we're talking about here, it's development driven, like Commissioner Hedrick was talking about. We need the development in order to achieve some, if not many, or most of these infrastructure objectives and like outcomes. But it made me wonder, like, are there opportunities for us to do, most of these will exist on private property, maybe not all of these opportunities are on private property. Obviously parkland is an enormous opportunity for us to do a lot of this work, and it is going on right now. But internally, do we ever do studies, or are there opportunities for us to do studies, planning exercises related to this, where the intention is not as much to influence private development, although that could be an outcome, but it's also to influence the capital improvement program at the county, to say, here's opportunity, like let's focus on some downtown areas, some of our densest areas, with the goal of like, here are some concrete CIP projects or recommendations that could come out of it for these specific areas. Because maybe that's we need development for a lot of this, but what, in the interim or kind of outside of that on a parallel track, could that be another way to kind of get at some of these issues and try to bring it to the county?
Yes, actually, so we're about to embark on the Green Street Guidelines, and that's a perfect way of bringing this into CIP projects. We also use our Reforest Montgomery, the fee and lieu money through Reforest Montgomery to plant shade trees on private property in equity areas. And so a lot of those are the areas that are really hot, that are older, and were disenfranchised at some point in time. So we're trying to approach this in many ways. But yes, I think the Green Street Guidelines would be a really good example.
I would just add that I think a number of our larger placemaking initiatives, like Burtonsville, Wheaton, Damascus, I think have informed not necessarily redevelopment, but in some cases redevelopment that's renovation of existing buildings and not necessarily new units and so forth. It's actually informing it in a different way that talks about kind of the place itself and how that space can be used.
And can I just really quickly, I want to respond very, very quickly, respond to Commissioner Bartley. I really feel like we've been making recommendations when there's urban areas that are being developed, when there's site plans that are being developed. We've been really pushing for a green cover. And that green cover that we've been pushing for has a purpose, and it's to cool. So, that's another way to get both density and cooling is for that. I just wanted to plug that.
And you're ending on note at the bottom of your slide, it's difficult to cool communities. It's urgent that we do. So thank you. Great. Thank you for bringing this forward, and thank you for the robust discussion from the board. And we look forward to projects that come before us that we can look at it more through the lens of this cooling and making them green. Thank you so much. And we're going to, why don't we just go into the, we're going to go into our item number 6. It's a closed session according to the Maryland Annotated Code, General Provisions, Article 3-305B1, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of an employee, appointee, employee, or official over whom it has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. The topic to be discussed is director's performance evaluation. So do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Yeah, I'll move to go into closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. And so this will, after closed session, that'll end our planning board meeting for today, and we'll see everyone next Thursday. Have a great weekend.